Welcome, everyone. I'm Thais from Kale. We're so glad that you've joined us for this session, Evaluation of Community Credentials. Before we start, I'd like to share some quick housekeeping tips. All attendees are muted, but please feel free to introduce yourself and meet fellow attendees in our chat feature. With that, I'd like to welcome our speaker, Sarah Lacey, to begin the presentation.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's really good to be here with you today and to share some insights from what I have been working on in the last few years. This is, as she said, the evaluation of community credentials. I am Sarah Lacey, just to make sure you're all in the right place. I want to just give you a brief view of my background, how I got into this, what I'm up to. I previously worked at a university that did a lot of credential evaluations, business, IT, HR, other programs, law enforcement, nursing, a whole bunch of credentials that we were constantly evaluating, reevaluating, updating. Oh, the curriculum changed, you have to reevaluate a bunch of those. So it's just a normal part of what we did. I came to Metro in May of 2021. And I started, Metro is a much smaller university. We'll talk about Metro in a second, but did not have, I had some experience in practice of doing, reviewing credentials for credit. And we call it certificates to credit at Metro. But not as standard of a practice, not as long-term. And they were mostly focused on credentials in the communities that community partners were offering. And I'll give a couple of examples of that. Also, there wasn't a lot of documentation of the process, so that has been one of my focuses, which we'll also discuss. So Metro State University, to be formal about it, is headquartered in St. Paul, Minnesota, although we have a couple different campuses throughout the Twin Cities area. We do a lot of online classes. One thing that's relatively common is that students show up on campus for the first time, sometimes after they've been a student for quite a while and don't know where the library is because haven't needed to know it yet. And they don't necessarily spend a lot of time physically on campus, even though they might be using our resources on a regular basis. We are an institution that was founded in the 70s, specifically to serve adults in the metro area. That's still what we're doing. That's the core of our work. A lot of Pell eligible, a lot of students of color, part-time students, almost entirely transfer students. We do accept freshmen and sophomores, but almost all of our students have some transfer credit. We have about just over 9,000 students total, mostly adults, mostly first generation. So that's our population. A little bit more about the university itself. Really strong community connections. That's one thing I was super impressed with when I first came. It's always had a Institute for Community Engagement and Scholarship, which helps kind of bridge the between the community and the institution. Also just a lot of faculty who are really involved in their fields in the Twin Cities areas who are involved just in the community in general and bring that into their curriculum. So that is very normal at Metro. Just so you'll understand a few things later on, our general education program, it's called the Minnesota Transfer Curriculum, and it has 10 goal areas. They are looking at simplifying that. Some of them have even categories within the 10 goals. So our transfer curriculum is a little complex, but it is shared across the 20-some community colleges in the state and the other, there's a total of 7 universities. So transferring in that way is relatively easy, even if the transfer curriculum is a little complex. The institution that offers the class determines if it meets a goal area or not, which becomes important for one of our first examples. So I want to talk about the International Institute of Minnesota and our partnership and our work with them. This is started before I came to Metro, and I got sort of unceremoniously dropped into the middle of it. But have had a great time getting to meet them, getting to know the International Institute and their programming. It's been really fascinating. So I'm very excited to introduce them to you. The International Institute of Minnesota is a comprehensive agency serving immigrants and refugees in Minnesota. And when I say comprehensive, if there is a thing that an immigrant or refugee needs to know to live in Minnesota, they will teach it to them. So they have, we're going to talk about their preparations for work, their courses for students who want to be in higher ed. They have home buying, home ownership, American culture, all of those things. My favorite thing that I found when I was researching for this presentation is that because we are Minnesota, they teach classes to people who have never lived in a winter climate before, including how to walk on ice, which is, they have some great pictures of that. And so that's just an example of how, when we say comprehensive, they mean comprehensive. Their classes are free, and just across the board, they are extremely student-centric. They really narrow in on what students need to meet their goals, and they have a really good understanding of where the barriers are culturally, where the barriers are structurally, like within higher ed or within the employment system, and they are really dedicated to knocking those down. So we reviewed 2 of their classes. I'm going to kind of give away the end of the story here and say that they both are available, or that we offer credit for both of them. 3 credits, different goal areas. So the English for Work is the International Institute's course. It's designed to meet a whole variety of types of work that students might want to get into, sort of technology levels, knowledge of culture. It's designed to help students bridge into being able to work in the United States successfully. And in the end, that course met our goal 7, human diversity. Students can earn 3 credits of that. I won't read you the whole description of that goal, but you can see how the 2 would fit together. And the International Institute also offers what's called College Readiness Academy. Students, this is really targeted at students who want to be in higher education. Most of their students go from the College Readiness Academy to a community college where they have great partnerships, and then from there to a university level or college for your institution. What's really fascinating about this is it's a free class, but it's the same skills as expensive prep classes that, you know, high school seniors are taking, paying a lot of money for. So I think that's a great way to see at least some leveling of the field. And in the end, College Readiness Academy meets 3 credits of Goal 8, Global Perspectives. So that is very cool. And it's also very exciting with both of these to see that it's a way for immigrant and refugee students to not have to demonstrate again that they have a global perspective. Like, of course they do. So, but we have done the work to make sure that College Readiness Academy and English for Work are verifying that. So let's talk a little bit about the process. There was an interdisciplinary faculty team that got together. They worked with the International Institute of Minnesota staff. The first findings were they were across the board impressed with the programs. They found that the content was college level, and not, I want to say, entirely college level, because, you know, these students are coming in at different places, but there's enough college level content for the 3 credits. But initially, the Gen Ed goals were the challenge, and they were really focused on having credit that would be useful to students. Most Metro students don't need more electives, and they really wanted to make sure that the courses were going to fit into a program somewhere. So that's where the Gen Ed goals came in. Faculty provided guidance on what they'd be looking for with those goals. And the International Institute of Minnesota staff felt that those were reasonable changes that they could make, especially because of the benefit it would have for students. And so then the faculty who were doing this evaluation were impressed with the changes, brought them to the Gen Ed committee, and that committee approved that the courses are now eligible for 3 credits in their specific goal areas. And what's cool about that is it means that if a student has met goal 7 or goal 8 at Metro, they've met it anywhere in our state system. And so even if they go to a community college, technical college, whatever that might require those goals, they're not going to be expected to take a goal 7 or 8 course. This is about the time when I came to Metro, and what I was told was that this was all great, it was all done. We needed a press release written for it, and could I do that? Which is how I found out that none of the rest of the work had been done. And fortunately, this is the part that we're about to talk about is the part where I felt the strongest, like, oh yeah, I can work with the admissions and transfer evaluation teams. We can iron all this out. You know, it's a little bit of, should have had them in earlier in the process, but it was fine in the end. So I communicated with those teams about how are we going to treat this process? What forms do we need? What documentation do we need? All of that kind of stuff. So what our admissions team did is create an admissions form for students to be non-degree seeking. So if students were coming directly to Metro, which would be kind of the rarer case, they could just apply as a regular student, send in their International Institute of Minnesota certificate, and the credit would be there. But the majority case was that students would be going to a community college. So in order to make sure that we had the credit recorded at Metro, we admit them, this is an ongoing thing, as non-degree seeking students. So it doesn't mess with their financial aid or anything. It just gives us a way to say this is somebody who has requested credit here, put them in the system, and we can award the credit. So that has, like I said, the benefit of it's already on file when they're at the community college. It's on file if they do, hopefully, and when they come to Metro after community college. And also it just, I think one of the bigger benefits is that we're not expecting them to hold on to a paper certificate for a couple of years till they come to Metro. Like, it's already on their record. Doesn't matter if they lose the certificate the minute after they send it to us. It's all recorded. And also what's cool is that we can code these students to report on them and message them specifically. This has been going on long enough that we have a few students. There's just a few who have kind of gone through the community college system and who have appeared at Metro. The ones I know of are in nursing, which kind of makes sense. But we do know that a lot of them are in community college still, and are working on that. One thing I will say, just that I've learned from the International Institute, is that if you think you have data issues within your college, for the International Institute to get the kind of data that their funders need from higher education institutions is really challenging. And then keeping track of students when they move on and aren't necessarily in daily contact or regular contact with the Institute, that's also very challenging. So any reporting we can do is super helpful to them as well as to us. Obviously, we want to know what our students are up to and what results we're getting. So are there any questions at this point?
I don't see any in the chat right now, Sarah.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask before I jump into a slightly different topic. I want to share another example of an evaluation we've done. The Boards and Commissions Leadership Institute trains people of color to join government boards and commissions, so it's well named, and most importantly, to be successful advocates once they're on those boards. So these are the sort of governmental bodies at I think they operate mostly at the state or the county level, where water quality, any health issue you can think of has a board or commission in the state. Different populations, there's different professions have their own boards and commissions. So there's a lot of kind of governmental work that happens in this space. And Nexus Community Partners is the organization that runs the Boards and Commissions Leadership Institute. And they want people of color to be well represented and to be successful advocates on these boards. So that's kind of the background. We at Metro have a Master's in Advocacy and Public Leadership program, and it's called MAPL. So if you hear me using that acronym, that program really sees, the faculty see it, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but just the way that they talk about it, they're looking at it like sort of as an ecosystem, like that their program is connected to advocacy organizations, to leaders within the community. In the Boards and Commissions Leadership Institute, they already have a relationship. There's graduates from that are students at Metro or faculty or staff at Metro and vice versa. So there's already a lot of connections. So it was, when we talked about doing some credential evaluations in this program, it was sort of the most obvious one to start with. Because they already have a relationship, but they also see this as a way of strengthening their relationship and strengthening their program. I'm not going to go through the details of the process because it was very similar. In this case, it came out to 4 credits of a topics course, which is essentially an elective. But this program, master's programs are operate a little different than undergrad programs and don't tend to have students coming in with many electives, although it happens, but the majority of students would not have that. So the 4 credits of elective is going to be fine. We did the same process with the admissions and transfer credit evaluation. It isn't as important in the sense of these students aren't like going to community college and doing half of a master's degree, but when we talked about it, our thought process was it's super rare that students who come out of the BCLI program are going to want to go immediately into a MAPL program. But could we plant the seed? Could we let them know that if this is a thing that they've thought about in the future, that it's there? And then again, like I mentioned, we can do messaging, pull reports, that sort of thing. So it's helpful that way to have the credit set up so they can just send in their form at the end of their program. And our message is like, if you ever think you would want a master's degree, just fill out the form, because the form is literally like 3/4 of a page. Like it's mostly name and address and a few other demographic questions. So it's not arduous process or anything, and you might as well bank your credit, and then if you come to Metro at some point, it's there, and if you can use it, you can use it, and if not, then that's fine too. So mostly what I want to talk about is the lessons that I've learned from doing this work, because there have been a lot, and some of it is the same as what I learned working with the big industry credentials like the CISSP and the PMP and the SHRM ones, but some of them are very different. So I just want to talk through some of that. Okay, get everybody's buy-in and get everybody else's buy-in. Okay, that's a little bit of a joke. It's just what it feels like when there's always sort of new people involved and new faculty, or there's a new person in an office that hasn't heard of this before. So there's just always this kind of process of getting buy-in. I don't want to make it sound like if your entire university isn't bought in, you shouldn't move forward, because there's always going to be people who either don't get it or who don't believe in it or whatever. But just be prepared to be explaining this, be prepared for people to be questioning it. And I don't always succeed, but I try to take the questions as if they are just genuine curiosity, even when I think maybe there's a more of a motive behind them, because there are just a lot of people, Metro faces this all the time, we have faculty and staff and everybody who's been educated at institutions that are not like Metro. And so a lot of the assumptions that people come in with are not accurate. And so we want to just introduce like why we do credit for prior learning in general, why we do the credential evaluations, and sort of gently invite them into the process. So, as I mentioned with both of my examples, credit needs to be useful to students. There are definitely times when elective credit is helpful, but it's almost always going to be more helpful to have specific, like if you're in HR and you have a SHRM certification, getting HR credit's most useful. Having the gen ed goals being met is helpful to our students. So I'm always looking for what is the actual lift to students, because I occasionally have a student who could just benefit from credits, but most of them will benefit from specific requirements being met. That said, we do have a program that's individualized studies, where students work with faculty to design their own degrees. And so those students will often benefit from this kind of thing, particularly if there's upper division credit. But I just like to go into this knowing like which students is this going to benefit and in which way. Continuity. Like I said, when I came into the International Institute project, I was told it was much more finished than it turned out to be. And part of that was just that there was the turnover, and people thought my predecessor did stuff and other people didn't, and like there wasn't a lot of documentation and good communication around that. So we've all been in that situation though, where somebody leaves and they a lot of their knowledge isn't written down anywhere. It's just all in their head and they know what the status is. So I'm just encouraging everybody. I'm big on writing things down. You'll see that come up again. And communicating as well as we possibly can. And by the way, this happens on both sides. Like at the International Institute, one of our key partners got promoted, which is great. But it also means that now we have another, she's getting backfilled. So she was teaching and running one of the programs. We'll need to reach out, make sure that we're in communication with that person, that they understand what's going on, that they understand why having students, why explaining our process to students is really important, and having them fill out the forms if they're at all interested. So just managing that on both sides. And, like even within my institution, things are so siloed and everybody's so busy. This one is really challenging, but I also think even having small touch points can really keep things from going too haywire. I noticed, I just happened to go to an International Institute breakfast where they had a speaker come in, and one of their staff came up to me and said, "Hey, this is all going great. I just have one quick question." And it wasn't a question that they could have emailed me, that, it's just making those opportunities for communication is important. So I always like to encourage that. Like I said, I'm real big into documentation. And this time I do mean it. Like, document stuff, document it again, share the documentation, have one source where the documentation lives and everybody goes there. And I just cannot stress how important this is. In particular, what I learned at my previous institution is that when you're going to go back and reevaluate something, either because curriculum changed, because the credential changed, or just because a certain amount of time has lapsed and it's time to reevaluate them, It's a lot easier if you can see the documentation of what was done before, and then you can see what's different versus starting from scratch. Also, like I mentioned, if we have somebody new in the registrar's office and this comes up and it hasn't been explained to them yet, then they're just going to be like, oh, no, that's not a why would we do that? That's not a thing. I don't know what you're talking about. Whereas if we have documentation, then hopefully they're getting trained on it, but also at least the documentation is available for them to look at. So and also, like, I've been working on documenting things for myself, like what works best with communicating with the registrar's office. At what point do we bring in the admissions office? How do we explain certain things to certain people? Like, just really beefing up the process documentation. Because like I have a wide-ranging job and sometimes I work on this really intensely and then it's not a focus for a while. And when I come back to it, it's like, how do we do this again? So, just documenting it for my own purposes has been really helpful. Like I mentioned with the our MAPL program, but this is true for all of our programs, looking at it from an ecosystem approach. Like, yes, I'm totally in favor of, like, our IT program right now is reviewing some of the CompTIA certifications, and we're just going to sort of plug those in. But really looking at it from a perspective of where are the relationships that our program needs? Who are the key people in the community? How do we do better outreach to students? Where would we find students? Like, all of that, like thinking about it as an ecosystem, I think is really smart. It really makes, helps us work smarter, not harder, and get the most out of our efforts, because I've never met a higher education professional who has downtime. Like, that's not how we operate. And so we want to be really efficient with the efforts that we do get into. And so I think looking at things holistically and understanding all of the benefits and all of the challenges is really key. This work really moves at the speed of relationships. Now, like my IT folks who are looking at the CompTIA certifications, nobody at CompTIA knows or probably cares. Maybe they care a little bit, but they are not, like, we have the information we need, CompTIA publishes it, it's all fine. When we're working with community-based organizations, it's totally different. It's totally about relationships. And it's usually the faculty that are maintaining the relationship. So that means the community organization has its own sort of cycle of the year or the quarter or whatever. And then we have our own semester cycle. So sometimes things slow down for us when they don't slow down for them, and vice versa. And I can be a little impatient, I will admit, letting things move at the speed of relationship and figuring out how to project manage things that are very slow, very relationship based, very much like, well, let's consult on our side and then you consult on your side, and then after we hear from both sides, we'll kind of come back together. Like, there's just a lot of communication that needs to happen and a lot of people who need to be either involved or at least informed. So this one is a real challenge for me because I want to, like, set deadlines and, check in and whatever. And our faculty have actually been really great. They've said, we will keep you informed. And sometimes the information is going to be that we're working on it. But yeah, finding that balance of, like, how much to push and how much to just sort of let it happen has been really challenging for me, who would rather just sort of set up a schedule and some deadlines and then move on. So that is the end of my formal presentation. Here is my contact information. I really love talking about this stuff. I'm really invested in like CALE and connecting with people and getting the word out about credit for prior learning and helping people do that better. And so if you have questions and want to talk to me, definitely find me. My contact information is also in the attendee hub, and you can download this presentation as a PDF from the attendee hub. I hope I didn't promise anything incorrect there. I am going to stop sharing and ask if there are questions at this point.
If there are any questions for Sarah, just go ahead and drop them in our chat in attendee hub, and I'll make sure she sees them. Got one. Thank you for providing the presentation on the resource tab. Good job, Sarah.
Happy to do that. It might have been at the absolute last minute, but it did happen.
It's up there for them.
Yeah, and with a little help from the Kale staff. Shout out to the people here who are at the physical conference and also doing tech support for the virtual conference.
Okay, I think we got a question.
Mhm.
Well, first, it's a thank you and what a great program. Our community college is just at the very beginning of the CPL partnership journey. Any advice for absolute beginners?
Well, I would say nobody has figured out CPL perfectly. So I have a couple of thoughts. One is that you don't need to figure out CPL as a whole. You need to figure it out for your institution, which is in some ways easier and probably in some ways harder. So finding the things, the starting points where, like people call it low-hanging fruit, but I'm like, it's still a lot of work. So I don't think it's the easy, like you're taking the easy way out. I think it's, finding the people who are most supportive, the programs where things make the most sense. Like, do you have a lot of students from a particular population? Do you have students, are you serving a particular industry? Do your students want to go into a particular industry? And can you find connections there? I think that's the most logical place. Like, we have a lot of students who are immigrants and refugees who have come through the International Institute program. So that's a very natural connection. With our Masters of Advocacy program, it was another, like, it's an organization that does a particular kind of advocacy with the kind of students that we are trying to serve. So very natural connections. You know, if you have a local business that does a particular kind of training that you can bring in, it really does come down to knowing your students, knowing your faculty, knowing your programs, and what's going to make sense for them. I will say, I used to work more in the IT realm a lot, and if you have a lot of students who are wanting both a degree and a certificate, looking at what that certification might be and finding ways to bring that into the program is super helpful, because those are competing time and money goals for students. And if anything we can do to streamline those and make the credentials a little more stackable is very helpful.
Thank you, Sarah. Do we have other questions?
Oh, one more plug for things newbies can do. That is, if you are a member of Kale, and it's called Kale Connect. It's an online connection hub, social network. I don't know what the best term for it is. I'm in it like at least a couple of times a week, but it's a great place to jump in and just say like, hey, we're trying to do credit for prior learning for this program in this way, and we got stuck on this problem, or just to look for other people who have similar programs, or whatever your question might be. So that's another plug for newbies.
And this is totally just something that I heard in a session earlier today, and I don't know how standard it is, but I know you were talking about buy-in, Sarah, how important it is, but I did hear one program talking about compensation for faculty who will have to do the assessments and building that into the budget. So I don't know if that helps anyone or, but it's something that, because I can see how the extra work could deter some faculty from wanting to buy into credit for prior learning, but if there's compensation for the extra work, that might be helpful. So thinking about building that into any funding structure on the front end might be helpful.
Yeah, and that's a good point about knowing your own institution. So like at our institution, it would be extra pay. Some places it's release time. Some places it's, hey, you're the chair now. Guess what you're responsible for? You know, there's a whole bunch of different models, but yeah, really thinking about what motivates faculty and how to bring them in and get their, that's another aspect of their buy-in is literally buying their time in some format.
Any other questions for Sarah? Okay, if there are no more questions, I just want to thank everyone for joining the session today, and also thank our speaker for sharing such amazing content with our participants. Just a quick reminder to attendees that please to complete the evaluation attached to this session. We do use the feedback to help us shape future content, so please remember to fill that out. And I just want to thank everybody for their participation.
Thank you to everybody who took time to come, and for supporting this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. No problem. Hey, everybody have a great rest of the conference.